much, and good morning and afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining us for this presentation. As Shannon pointed out, we're going to spend the next several moments walking you through some of the labor risks that we face in employing people on the job site and some of the things that are coming up with regard to legislation and so forth. So I get to spend the first half of the presentation talking about risk and dangerous things, and then I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and he's going to talk about a solution that we have that can help you with some of those things. So he gets to take care of it and calm some of your fears. So what we're going to talk about today is related to the FLSA, or Fair Labor Standards Act. And by way of some background or history, this was actually a piece of legislation that's been with us for a long, long time. And most of you will recognize some of the components of it, but it was enacted back in 1938. And effectively, we all know it because it brought us things like the 40-hour work week. It brought us child labor laws and also introduced minimum wages. So it's actually been around for a long time. Of course, we tend not to speak the language of it so much anymore. So it's one of those things that we know about, but probably don't always recognize where it came from or how it came to be. But because of many amendments over the ensuing years, it is what I would describe in the business world as a moving target. So it can present risks for us as business owners, sometimes without us really knowing about them, and we're going to talk about some of those today. Now, when we look at data from the federal government and look at what are referred to as filed cases against FLSA claims, we see that the numbers are spiking. In fact, the numbers are going way, way up, and we're going to talk in specific detail about why some of those are taking place and what's behind those and so forth. And again, we're going to reference some of the things behind those cases and speak specifics. So one thing that I like to point out here, though, these are cases that represent FLSA claims. These do not represent, so in terms of these numbers, do not represent local and state government cases, but the numbers are alarming, as you'll see. In fact, some of the judgments are pretty alarming as well, and they're items that you'll want to ensure you're knowledgeable about to protect your organization. So when we look at some specifics, in 2015 alone, there have been some judgments against organizations for civil lawsuits that have resulted in some very, very substantial payouts in the areas of overtime recognition, in the areas of recognition of employees that are employees as opposed to subcontractors. So the references are things like stolen wages and penalties and so forth. And of course, the numbers jump out at us. And some of these organizations probably are recognizable to some of the folks on this call. Now, that's not all of the story. So there are, of course, civil claims and civil judgments, but they're also criminal and probably even maybe a little more scary to those folks that are responsible for managing labor and managing HR for your specific company. So when we talk about, of course, civil penalties, those are dollars. When we talk about criminal penalties, those result in time in prison, time in jail, and so forth. And I would dare say much, much more frightening in many respects. But these claims can result in such charges as well. Now, what we're really here to specifically talk about today is classifying employees as to whether they're independent contractors or they're employees, and also some of the changes around what are referred to as salary and means tests, but effectively identifying those employees that are hourly for overtime and so forth. And these rules are going through some what I would describe as significant changes, and probably more importantly for most of us, they're not altogether clear. So our encouragement is, and we're going to provide some links and some information that will help you research these items, but to gain clarity around what these rule changes will mean, and I'm going to mention this again, everybody expects that there will be some changes put in place in the middle of this year, in the June-July timeframe, and it will be incumbent upon all of us to pay attention to those changes. So who will this affect? So when we talk about the Department of Labor and the changes around this salary test, so effectively this means those employees that are identified as salary employees, who typically we would expect are exempted from overtime pay, the rules will change around that, and those rules will be dictated, of course, by the federal government. The numbers that have been reported thus far is that it's likely to affect over 5 million workers in the U.S. So the identification of this, the identification of those people that are noted as salary and paid salary, however, work beyond a 40-hour work week, may change and may change classification within your organizations. And one of the things that Eric is going to be able to show us in a little while is how we can capture that data in a much, much more concise, much more accurate and timely way so that we have the information we require when reporting. Now, again, I'm going to mention this. We may have employees in our midst that today are classified as salary, which in the future or retroactively may be identified as no longer salary, which means some of those hours and some of those historical hours may actually qualify for overtime. So you're going to want to look at some of the resources we're going to provide, some of the websites that we're going to provide links for to carry out these tests within your organizations. Now, for preparation in 2016, as mentioned, there is an anticipated amendment to this legislation that will take hold sometime in the middle of the year. And the numbers with regard to salary amounts, and you've seen this before, but anything over or between $23,660 up to $50,440 are likely to change. And I guess essentially what the federal government is saying is that is probably a salary range that's too low to really be determined executive compensation. So it's very likely that the number for that is going to go up, and the number that I think we've all heard about is this $50,000 number, 50,000 and change, and that could very, very directly affect a lot of employees out there. And again, what we're going to point out is a system that allows for the automatic gathering of data around hours and the detailed data you'll need to have available for reporting purposes, both internally as well as externally. Now this link, and we will distribute this web meeting, this link will be available for you to go and look at the specific item. It's fairly dense material, I'll warn you at this point in time. It will take some work to get through, but you'll see that these are very, very good resources, again, for you to review your current employee standards and classifications. Now, in addition to that, is the realities test for independent contractors. And again, we've got a link, again, additional fairly dense material that I would encourage you to work through, identifying those tests, those means tests for individuals that you may have working for you as independent contractors that could very well fall into the classification of employees. And so on this page, we can illustrate some of those items, some of the things that you will see on that link. So is this employee an integral part of your business? Does this person actually have managerial responsibilities or profit and loss associated with their particular profit and loss effectiveness? And then relative investment on the part of the worker. So some of this, as we've dug in, does the worker show up with tools? Does the worker show up with materials and so forth? And again, you'll want to review the details around those things. I won't read these in detail for you. We are going to provide this material for your perusal at your convenience. And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Eric, and Eric's going to talk about and demonstrate a software component that will allow you to better gather on mobile devices information about your field employees. And then we'll follow that up in about another 15 minutes with a question and answer period. So you'll be able to, as Shannon indicated, pose your questions for us and we'll address them at the end. Eric?
Okay, thank you, Marty. Can you hear me okay and see my screen?
Absolutely can.
All right, well, very good. Thanks for that introduction and that preamble. There is a lot to learn and a lot to know about the changes for sure. One thing or multiple things that AboutTime can do and does do to help with all these requirements. You know, the burden I think that is placed on companies is to get accurate data and also to have accountability for the employees. Accuracy is just huge. If you can get accurate data, they're paid the correct amount, you won't have difficulties like lawsuits over labor disputes and so forth. Accountability also can hold the employees accountable so that they can't cheat the company or cheat on their time records. So two of those issues are huge in AboutTime. The other part of the puzzle too, though, is, you know, getting accurate data is the beginning. Really managing that data, you need timely information coming in daily, so you don't have to wait till the end of the week to review and approve time records. Visibility across the organization, so people in different cities can review other employees' time from different areas. So just increasing that connectedness and visibility across the organization are also key. So really on this time wheel here, what we're going to focus on is collecting that time. Do know that you know, productivity measurements, tracking the time and whereabouts of your equipment are also critical. Lots of other data, especially, you know, in the end, once we've collected all the data, we do need to tie into your accounting and payroll systems. So all of this dovetails into collecting better time and protecting yourself against labor issues. So I'm going to pull up my mobile device so you can see. And as you can tell, I'm in Denver, so everybody's going Bronco crazy. I've got Denver Broncos Construction up here as my company. And so some of the issues with accuracy and also accountability, you know, we focus on, and our primary mode of data collection is real time. So when an employee or a crew shows up at a job site, they actually use their mobile device, whether it's their smartphone or their tablet or their laptop, to actually clock in. And we do have some enhancements on that can, you know, hold the employee more accountable. So I'm going to clock in here as DeMarcus, and let's say I'm working down here at the Broncos practice facility, and I clock in. There's my smiling face, and you can see that the next thing, there we go, my air server's lagging just a hair. They can tell you what activity they're doing too. By the way, while I'm on this cost code screen, this is what activity they're performing. In many companies, there may be a pay differential depending on the type of equipment they're using, or maybe the activity, whether it's travel time or real time at the job. So the system can associate the proper pay code as long as they clock into that code, you know, on the system. So if I were to clock into travel time, it could trigger automatically a pay code that's appropriate for travel if it's different from their normal work or labor code. But you know, if I'm doing an activity, I can go ahead and clock in. It not only took my photo to verify that I was that actual employee on the job, but it can also, in the background, collect a GPS fix on my location so I can prove where I was when I clocked in. So this is really intended to protect not only the company but also the employee, so that they can prove where they were and what time they showed up at the job, so there's, again, no dispute about that. We also have the ability for, you know, those critical initial in punches and final out punches at the end of the day are often the most critical ones to prove the employee's whereabouts and that they were at the job. We have tools where we can have a foreman or a crew leader kind of managing all their activities throughout the day on the job site. So I'm going to show you one other little option that we have where you could clock in as a whole crew. So if I was a foreman or a crew leader, I can go ahead and say, okay, I've got these guys on my crew, so here's me, I'm the foreman, here's my guys. I could select other employees from down here, but if my crew is myself and these guys and we're going to move over to another task, I can just simply move those guys over. So maybe we're going to start working on a footer. And so throughout the day, the foreman or the supervisor could go ahead and manage all those job costing, what I like to call intermediate time punches for the employees. At the end of the day, when it's time to sign out, especially in some states where it's critical that they take their breaks, or that you want to protect yourself, that the employee acknowledges that there were no injuries, when it is time to clock out, you'll see again, so there's DeMarcus. I'm going to go ahead and hit the out punch. And it'll say, did you take your required breaks? You can answer that yes. Or in this case, I've got, were there any injuries today? You can make these feedback questions in multiple languages, so there's no question about did you understand the questions. So that's one thing a lot of folks do upon clock out is they require through the system that the employees actually answer those feedback questions. Did you take your breaks? Were there any injuries today? One other thing, and this is a different element in the system as far as accountability, that if you want to go to the next level of accountability, we can even deploy systems where the employee clocks in and clocks out biometrically with a fingerprint. So I can walk up to the device, have it scan my finger, and then allow me to clock in. So the only way that I could actually get on the clock would be to scan a fingerprint. So we do have workflows and different options where you could do a finger scan as an alternate way to collect that information. Now, some of the other issues that are often brought up too is, well, the reason we do paper timesheets is we have to have something for the employee to sign. And so we've developed different methods, and probably the easiest and most popular way is just go ahead and have each employee sign for their time right there on the device as they send in their time records. So if you do need, for that accountability sake and also liability sake, to collect a signature, you can go in at the end of the day, go into your records, and do an approval. If my error server will catch up to me, so I'm going to hit the approve time records. Come on, error server. There we go. So let's say I'm Antonio. This is showing you my time for the day. I know I arrived at the job at 7. I clocked out at 4. So I've got a total of 9 hours that I'm going to go ahead and approve. There is the ability to collect signatures not only for the employee but the manager. But let's say I'm going to approve these as an employee with the signature, and I can go in and give you that signature. Now that will be attached to the time record so that you've always got that protection that the employees have signed for their time. When they sync those time records in, they will include that digital signature. If you use that photo on clock in, it'll also have the photographic proof that those employees were at the job site. And then one more layer is that GPS, so that you can prove that they were at the job site when they said they were. Now, one other piece, when you have sent those records into the office, there is the ability in the system to show an audit trail. Audit trail reporting is key, especially if there's any changes or edits made to the employee's time records. Again, this is all about protecting yourself for liability. I'm going to open up, this is the administrative part of AboutTime, where managers and supervisors, department heads can review and approve time, or like I said, make those edits. So one key window that they might get into is their time window, which is the time editor window. And you can see here, I've got employees, what job they were at, what activities they were working on, their start and stop time, and so forth. But here's a record highlighted in bright blue. And if you see the little pop-up balloon, it says the original time was 7 o'clock, and an administrator in the system actually changed that to 6:30. So that's highlighted in big bold letters so you know that that record was changed and who made the edit. There is an audit trail report so you can track all of those changes once they're made. So whether they make the change in the office or maybe they made the change out in the field, you do have the ability for a foreman or a crew leader to set to edit records if you give them that right out in the field. So that audit trail would also show up as well. Now, I did want to mention that we also have the ability, if I go back to my slideshow here, setting up overtime rules. We have a fairly elaborate overtime engine to track overtime by day or by week. Conditional overtime rules where if overtime happens on a Monday, we want to charge the job that they were working on Monday when it occurred. Different levels of setting up overtime rules, so there's a lot of capabilities there. Shift rules as well, if you have more than one shift, a day, evening, night shift. So there's quite a bit of capabilities there so that different shift rules might incur different rates of pay and so forth, so we can keep your shifts separate in the system, and then even holiday pay capabilities, so it makes it easy for a manager to create holiday records for pay in the system. So our goal, again, is to give you an ability to collect accurate time records, provide the accountability for the employee to hold them accountable, timeliness and visibility across the organization, and really just try to make this more streamlined and a heck of a lot more efficient than dealing with piles of paper that is the nightmare for a lot of companies to deal with. So I think having said that, that concludes at least the product part of this. I think we may want to open the floor to some questions and answers. Shannon, do you want to manage that aspect?
Sure, yeah, we have some questions. We have just a couple minutes to go ahead and get through those so that we can be conscious of everyone's time. And here's the first question. It's kind of a combination question. How are employees and jobs set up in your software? Do you have to manually key them in, or will your solution automatically pull the employee and accounting data into your solution?
So, Eric, do you want to address that, or would you like me to?
Go ahead, Marty. I was looking at my screen. If you'll go ahead and take that one.
Of course, the Bronco fan was looking at his screen. Okay.
Yeah, I was checking the Broncos statistics. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly, and we do have one fan out there, I noticed. I'm sorry. So yes, we download the data for job records, for cost code records, for employee records directly into AboutTime. So none of that information has to be manually entered. When you first implement AboutTime, you're able to download that information and also set up subsequent timeframes in which that data should be shared again. The other thing I would point out is as we gather time information in AboutTime, as Eric pointed out and showed on the screen, you will see it in a spreadsheet. And you have the ability to review, to make corrections, and assign approval. So once that time is approved, that data can be sent to your payroll system for processing, for actually processing payroll, but also all of the job and cost code distributions will be part of those records as well. So you're getting your job cost distributions as well. So it is meant to be, it was built to be interactive with virtually every accounting system on the planet.
Okay, thanks, Marty. We had another question come in. Can you set up questions on the biometrics?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that one. The questions may be in terms of feedback questions. Were you injured on the job today? Did you take your required breaks? Yes, the employees, upon clocking out at the end of the day, can be required to answer those questions. And they are attached to the time record. So We keep a record of those. There's even an employee feedback report, available in the system too. So I believe, if I understand the question, that the answer to that question is yes.
Okay. In relation to different labor rules in certain states for required meal times and breaks, how do you guys handle that? And then also in conjunction, what are the options for handling non-paid lunch options?
I could go ahead and take that one again, Marty.
Sure.
There are some different options in AboutTime regarding lunch breaks, and I'll start with that one in particular. Lunch breaks are typically unpaid breaks for lunch. When I worked in construction, it was always very rigid. At noon, we stopped for lunch. You sat down on a pail and ate your lunch, and then at 12:30, you went back to work. And if it's rigid and exact and you're always following that schedule, AboutTime can assign what we call auto lunch to specific crews that you can automatically deduct that lunch break from noon to 12:30 every day, or whatever time frame you set. So that can be automated if you wish, and that's a great way to handle that. However, what I like to say, for employees that are mobile and they're moving around out in the field, they might be going to different jobs throughout the day, and their breaks for lunch are irregular. It might happen at 11 or 1 or 2. They might be short, they might be long. In a case like that, then yes, I think the answer is to use real time, and then they can clock out for lunch and clock back in when they go back. So it is possible to have different crews using different lunchtime methods for deducting their time off the clock, if you will, for lunch. As far as paid breaks, morning and afternoon, those can be handled in a couple of ways as well. They're typically on the clock because they're still getting paid for their morning and afternoon paid breaks. The key thing as far as protecting yourself, what we found is that if you make that feedback question at the end of the day state, I did take my breaks as required, they'll attest to that in the time records, and that is attached to their time record. That is an acceptable way to handle that and protect yourself. One other possibility could be that you could actually have a task called break time that they could clock into. If you really need to have the exact minute that they started their break and the exact minute that they ended their break, we could create tasks for break time. So again, it just depends on how granular you want to get into it, but we can accommodate that. I think the feedback question is probably the most popular way to manage that because it honestly is the easiest. Did that answer the whole question, Shannon? I think I touched on the issues.
Yes. And with that, we are hitting our time markers. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. We do have other questions that have come in, and then we'll send those questions off individually to address any of those questions. We do want to thank you for your time. If you'd like to see anything a little bit more in depth and do a custom demo that would work with your current workflow and processes, please go ahead and contact us and just reply to the email that I send out. We'll send a follow-up out with all of the links in the PowerPoint and also a video so you can share it with other people in your organization or other colleagues so that they're aware of the new salary test and thresholds for the Department of Labor that are going into effect. They're anticipating mid-July. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.